Okay, guys, happy Wednesday. Welcome back to another knitting class. Today feels like almost a finale because this is the last class of this year. I won't see you guys until January 7th. And then today's class is also about how to properly end a project and kind of just make it look nice and finished. So it's a little both ending times of the year and for knitting. So I am really excited to get started. Again, my name is Ti, and I am your instructor. And this class is brought to you by Better Spaces. Make sure that you are signing up for the classes in advance. Check for the class that's coming up in January. It should be January 7th, if I'm remembering correctly. So the day is going to remain as Wednesday, but the time is going to change to 1 p.m. So keep that in mind. I am going to add a couple things for you guys in the chat. Oh, Carmen says, so will you be back in January for another series? No, not another series. It'll be a continuation of the knitting series. So I have, I believe, two more classes to kind of round off and finish off the knitting class. Maybe in the future, I'll continue on with the knitting class or more, I guess, intermediate lessons, or maybe I'll do a beginner crochet class for you guys because I also do crochet. But for now, I'm going to add some things in the chat for you guys. Kind of made sure I did that in advance so that it's easier for me to get that down. All right, so enough of that. Last class, let me bring you to the overhead camera. So last class, we were going over um, how to fix your mistakes. And in the class, I ended at kind of completing everything, but there was one question that I didn't feel like I really answered well. So before we get into the new lesson, I want to quickly show you guys how to undo your knit. So I am just knitting a couple rows right now, and I'm going to show you how to undo that. So the completed work right now, because I'm on the back side, the completed work is on my right hand. Underneath that work, you could see a space here, and that was the previous stitch. So you see that bump here, because right now we're doing the garter stitch, which means you are knitting all your rows. So underneath that, you could see a space here. So if you went ahead and let's say you knitted across, and for some reason, if I could think of a reason, like maybe let's say you messed up on this stitch over here, you went through part of it, but not the whole stitch. So you want to go back and fix that. What you would do is, and I hope you can see it. If you guys can't see anything that I'm doing, just put a note in the chat and I'll zoom in for you guys. But I think you could see this well. So what you would do is you'll take your left hand needle and you're going to go in that space underneath here. Push your needle in that space. So now we have it on our right needle and we have our left needle inserted. What you're going to do is take your finger to kind of help keep this stitch on your needle, and you're going to push the right needle out and take away that stitch. Let me go a little closer for you guys. Make sure it's not blue. Okay. So again, there's a bump right here. And there's a space underneath. You're going to go into the space underneath, as you can see where my finger is. You're going to take your left needle and place it there, or whatever needle has the stitches that you didn't complete. You're going to place that into that space, and you're going to push the right needle out. And at the same time, you're tugging on the yarn to undo that work. So now you've moved it back onto your left needle, and there's less on your right needle. So one more time, you're going to go in to the space underneath, Push your left needle in there. Take your right needle out. I like to just use my hand as a little helping mechanism. Push that down. And then I pull on the working yarn, and then that stitch goes back on the other needle. So that's essentially how you are going to undo your knits. So that was a little bit for last class. So for this class, we're going to be going over how to finish your knitted project. So how to cast off, how to weave in your ends, and how to block your project. Let me push this back in here. All right, so now we're on our right side of the work. Kind of did knit stitch here instead of purling, but it's just so that you're able to see things a little bit better. Sometimes the purl stitch can be a little bit more confusing. So when you're casting off by working the stitch that is being used on your needle. So for example, if we had a row of pearls here, or we're working with a purl stitch, you'll continue doing that stitch. So we have a knit stitch here. We're going to knit that first stitch. If we had a purl stitch, we would purl. Same thing for the next one. We're going to knit that stitch. If we had a purl, we would purl. When you have two stitches on your needle, you're going to take the back stitch, so the one that you have first on your needle, and you're going to use your left needle to kind of help take that stitch. And you kind of need to use your hands sometimes to just keep it on the needle. And you're going to pass it over that first stitch. And that takes away one of your stitches. So again, depending on what you're doing, you're going to continue doing that stitch, right? So if you had purl here, I would have purled, but I have knit here, so I'm going to knit that stitch. I'm going to take the back stitch that's on your needle, on the right hand needle, and you're going to pass it over the front stitch. And that kind of creates this band here. And there's different cast off methods, but this is the simplest and most basic one to do. Again, I'm going to go into the stitch because I'm knitting. Always make sure with this cast off, you have two stitches on your right hand needle. You're going to take the back stitch. Maybe I'll just use my finger for this. And you just take it and you're putting it over maybe the crochet hook. Just want to make sure that you guys are seeing this well. I'm going to put my crochet hook in there because you can cast off using a crochet hook instead of the needle. I believe the thought behind that is it makes it a little bit more stretchier. So you want to go ahead and place this stitch over the other stitch so that that stitch is now no longer in working condition, like you're no longer able to use it. So again, two, take the one from the back, kind of lift it up a bit so it could go over the first one that you just placed on the needle, that, and then you're dropping that back stitch, right? Let's say, for example, now, maybe you're like, okay, I actually need another row. Maybe I shouldn't have cast off that early. Same thing. We look for the next row. You can see the next row of the previous row, I should say, of knits here in those spaces. So you just go back into that space, take your needle out, pull it through, place your needle back in. So again, if you accidentally cast off in a row too early, you're taking your needle again, the left hand needle, You're placing it through the space on the row below. I don't know if you can see that well. So this space here, and you're taking your needle out of that stitch on top. You're pulling the working yarn end. So now that stitch goes back on the needle, and then you just place your knitting needle back through that hole, right? So if we are casting off, we're going into the stitch, making sure there's 2 stitches on our right hand needle. We're taking the left needle, taking the yarn, the stitch that's in the back, and we're pulling it over that first stitch. So just like that. And you have to do a little bit of maneuvering with your hands to kind of help make sure that the stitches aren't sliding off. And I'm going to show you once more how to undo it if you are casting off too early. And that happens to me sometimes, especially when you're making your own pattern or just doing things without a pattern and just measuring as you go. Sometimes you cast off and then you realize, okay, maybe I need another row or two. It's quite easy. Just go back into the other side, take your needle out, pull on the working yarn, and then you have back your stitch here. And the one that you just cast off goes right back onto your left needle. So we're going to cast off fully because now I'm going to show you how to weave in your ends. And weaving in your ends is really important because if you don't, your project can and will unravel. Sometimes it takes longer, but at some point it will unravel. So you want to make sure that you are weaving in your ends so that you don't have to go through that. Last stitch. So I have the little mess up here. Okay. So when you get to the last stitch and you take out your needle, you're going to pull the end so that you have about 6 inches of tail. So this end is still attached to the ball of yarn. See, I could keep going and going, right? This end is not. So this end that's not attached, you want to make sure that you have about 6 inches of tail. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this here. Take away the working end of yarn. And now we have this part, right? Without weaving this in, this is easily able to come out, right? And we don't want that. So what we're going to do now is use our tapestry needle. And a tapestry needle is just a needle, comes in different sizes, different widths. If you're using a chunkier weight yarn, you want a larger tapestry needle so that it could go through the hole. If you're using a smaller weight yarn, obviously you could still use the same size needle, but when you're weaving in, maybe it's a little bit more cumbersome when you have a larger needle with smaller yarn. But I kind of use the same large tapestry needle. Okay, before I continue, I was just doing what I normally do without showing you guys. So what I normally do to kind of weave this in, because if you're trying to do it like how you do sewing, you can leave out a lot of strands. What I like to do is I fold over the end of the yarn just like this, and I do an even tighter fold by placing the tapestry needle underneath that bridge that I created. So we have this little portion here. Let me make it a little larger. So I take the tapestry needle and I just kind of, create a like stiffer fold over area, I guess. And then I take the end and I'm able to do it over. I'm able to easily slide the needle over the yarn, especially when you have a thicker weight yarn like this. So when you have a thicker weight yarn, it is really beneficial to have a larger opening. But if you are able to, you can squeeze through. So when you are weaving in your work, you want to weave in on the back side of your project. So let's say this is our back side, and you want to create almost like a zigzag. So you want to go up, well, you want to go down, then back up, and then back down, because this makes it like a little bit harder for anything to come undone. And you want to make sure that you're working down just at the top portion of the stitch because you don't want the ends that you're weaving in to show at the front portion of your project. So for a purl stitch, I like to go at a diagonal so that my work is able to hide underneath the pearls. So as you can see, I'm working along. And I like to go about 4 stitches down. And then I will pull that all through. And then I'm going to come back up in the same area that I have the bumps. So that makes it easier to hide something going through it. I'm going to pull through. And then I'm going to go back down again. So essentially you just want to, if you can, mimic the pattern. That way it's easier to hide. But if not, just make sure that you are going shallow enough into the stitch that it doesn't show through on the other side. So as you can see, I did a zigzag pattern here. If I pull it, it's not pulling everything because of that pattern. If I just went ahead and just went all the way down, let's say I use my, end and I'm weaving it in and I just decide to go all the way down my project. If I do that and I say, okay, I weaved in my project, what happens here is whenever, sorry, what happens here is whenever I now decide to, let's say something pulls on it for some reason, it's pulling my entire project, right? Um, this is also much easier to come out because let's say something snags on it here, your woven end is out. So that is the reason why it's important to do a zigzag pattern and to make sure that we're not kind of, being a little lazy with it and just putting it all in one row. It's just easier for it to come on down again. So with the zigzag pattern, if we pull on this, it's not pulling anything in the project. It's nice and taut. And then at the end, you just want to snip it off. Make sure that you do a little test before you snip off the end of your work. Okay, so that's weaving in. Let me know if you guys want me to do that again. In the meantime, I'm going to go over blocking your project. I'm not able to do the actual blocking video. Maybe I'll do a little short on that. But I just want to show you guys the difference of what your project looks like when it's blocked. Put it down. Okay, so here is a double knit ear warmer that I use for myself, especially when I have the afro. I think it's in my profile picture, if I'm remembering correctly. It might be a different color. But essentially, this is my ear warmer. And after I knitted it, it looked like this, right? It's just a long tube. Quickly, it's just joined here. You create another knitted portion, knitted strip, and you put it right here and, join it in the back. But what happens when you first do the project is that the yarn is pretty stiff, right? Not only is it stiff, but you could kind of see my different tension areas in the knit. There's some areas that the knit is nice and smooth. And there's some areas that, like this bumpy part here, that I don't know what I was doing, but as you're doing different things or, you know, you might get distracted, your tension kind of changes a little bit. So you could see all of that unevenness with my knitting, and blocking is going to take away all of that. So with this project now that I completed and I blocked, you could see how even the stitches look. Not only that, my project is nice and loose, right? There's no stiffness to it. I'm able to squeeze it and it just goes back into its shape versus the other stiff one that I just completed. So when you are blocking your project, there's, I guess, a couple ways that I've done it. The easiest ways that I've found to block your project is by using, if you have one of those little hand steamers, go ahead and use your hand steamer to steam the project. If it's 100% wool project, you want to give about 2 to 3 inch of space from the steamer. This is a yarn that could go in the wash. Again, on the gentle cycle, um, these store-bought yarns that could go in the wash, I've done just regular cycles and then they have been fine. Um, but because this can go in the wash, I do just press the steamer against it and steam it just like that. With the wool, you want to be careful because if you go too close and you add too much heat, you can felt the yarn. And that just means that you're not going to be able to see any of the stitches. It's just going to be matted, not matted, but it's just going to be binded together, if that makes sense. So you could do it that way. I've also done it where I've used a iron and I just used the steam portion of the iron. I've placed a towel on top and I just go ahead and iron it out. And that usually relaxes the fabric and the fiber. And another way to block your project is with wet blocking. That way, I've only used for my, hand knit cardigans and sweaters that I've spent a lot of time knitting, and I don't want to mess around with using the steamer and such. When you are doing that, you're going to go ahead and um, use a sink that you could clog so that you're able to have maybe a gallon, just enough to cover your project or a little bit more. And you want to use warm water, not hot water, but warm water, because the warmness of the water kind of relaxes the fibers a bit. And you want to use a gentle soap. Soak is one that, have been given to me when I bought more expensive yarn. They usually send that in the package. You could just use any gentle detergent. You want to put a little bit of detergent in that warm water, mix it around a bit. Then you're going to submerge your project in that water, do some gentle squeezes to make sure that that water is going into the fiber. And after you squeeze it out, you want to let that water run out in the sink or whatever, container you're using. When you are taking up your project, it's really important not to have the project soak in with water. So you want to do some gentle squeezes in the sink just to make sure you're getting most of that water out. And then once you do the squeezes, then you could kind of take it out as a whole. I'm using my hand as a big lump because, I'm thinking of like a sweater, but obviously if you're using an air warmer or something smaller, it's not a big deal as much. Once you take it out the water, you want to lay it flat to dry on a towel. You squeeze out the excess water out of your project by rolling it in a towel. So let's say, for example, this is the knitted project. This is the towel. You want to, well, let's use this because it's a little bit smaller. So let's say this is the knitted project. This is your towel. You want to go ahead and put the knitted project in the towel like this. So in the towel like this, and then you're going to roll the project in that towel and you're going to squeeze. So just like this, you're going to squeeze, and that's going to take out your excess water. And then you'll have a lot of knitters use a mat to leave your project to dry. I just go ahead and use another dry towel, and you could stake your project, which is just using pins to keep it in the form that you want, or you could just lay it down for the most part and it should be fine. I noticed that with the staking portion where they are putting a pin, like think of the mats that the kids have with the alphabets, those foam mats. So they'll use the staking for that so that they could kind of keep the shape. Or let's say you knit something and it's a little bit small on you, the staking works really well once you are doing the blocking um, process, so that you could essentially push it out a little bit more to give it a little bit more size and a better fit for you. When you are blocking your project, it's not going to be much bigger than what you already knitted. So there is a little bit of wiggle room as far as sizing, but you're not going to knit a size small and then block it out to a size large. It's just not really going to happen. But yeah, so that is going to be it. I think I've covered everything. If you guys have any questions, you can put it in the chat. I was really expecting to go over, but I didn't. So I'm going to give you guys a minute if you have any questions or want me to go over anything quickly before I end this class. I can't believe it's going to be Christmas already. Like, I'm not prepared at all. Let's see. Are you putting all the session you did for Better Spaces on your YouTube channel? Yes, I am trying my best. I have sickness going on in the house this week. Like I told you guys, the video that I get from Better Spaces comes the 2 days before, like the evening, um, 2 days before the class happens. And because of the chaos in the house, I wasn't able to upload last week, which would have been uploaded yesterday. So after this class, I'm going to upload last week. And again, this week's video is not going to come until the day before the next class, or I'm going to maybe try my best to do 2 days before. And yeah, anything that I feel like I could have done a little bit better, add a little bit more context. I'm going to try to maybe do some shorts for little separate videos on that. So just make sure that you are following the channel, because I'm going to have a lot more stuff coming outside of what I'm doing in the class for Better Spaces. You're welcome. All right, so that is going to be it, guys. Remember, next class is January 7th. It's going to be at 1 p.m. instead of 12 p.m. Do enjoy your holidays and have a happy new year. Thank you again for joining me for another class. Bye, guys.